okay, visualize this. You're a 7-year-old child. You're finally aware of what Christmas is like, and you come down the stairs or you walk through the door into the living room where the Christmas tree is and all the presents are. That's what you look like the first time you walk onto the floor at IFTD. It's magic.
That was Tom Sadler describing the experience when entering the floor at IFTD. AFFTA, IFTD, Brook Trout, and a whole bunch more today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. I have a few slots available for the next Alaska trip this coming summer. Go to wetflyswing.com/hosted. That's HOSTED to find out how you can connect with expert guests from the podcast and yours truly on an upcoming fly fishing trip. In today's episode, I chat with Tom Sadler, who breaks down the American Fly Fishing Trade Association and the International Fly Tackle Dealer Show. That's a mouthful, but basically it's a couple organizations that are all about helping fly fishing companies do a better job with their craft. And we get into a number of topics, including the connection with Patagonia Tenkara, his background on insurance, and what plastics in the ocean, what's going on there. So before we get into it, I just wanted to say thanks again. We're starting off on our next journey pretty soon with the fly tying season. And so we'll be wrapping up this current destination season we're on and jumping into that. So if you have a fly tying guest that you would like me to connect with, you can send me an email at dave@wetflyswing.com, and I'll try to find a way to get them on the show. This episode is sponsored by Deli Fresh Design, an all-American creator of fine, sustainable fly fishing gear. Stay tuned later in the show to hear how Ross does his part to reduce his waste and impacts with DLD, and how he builds great equipment in a sustainable fashion. You can find Fresh Equipment Designs on Instagram at Deli Fresh Design, and you can get 20% off your next order using the coupon code WFS20 at delifreshdesign.com. We are also sponsored by the Gray Drake, who provides high-quality heritage fly fishing tackle while being a good steward of our sport. The new Fall Run fly box they have available for 2019 features small and medium-sized clips on one side of the box and slotted cork on the other. Naturally self-healing and hydrophobic, will hold flies from the smallest midge to the largest stoneflies. Head over to thegraydrake.com and use the coupon code WFS20. That's WFS20 at checkout to get 20% off your next order of vintage today. So, without further ado, here's Tom Sadler from the middlerivergroup.com. How's it going, Tom?
I'm great, Dave. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on this morning. We've got, it's morning here. The great thing about the podcast is that depending on when people listen to this could be, 2022 or whatever, and they're listening to it in the middle of the night. But right now it's morning, and we're kind of getting started here. I've got my cup of coffee, and I'm ready to jump into some of the AFFTA and IFTD, and we were just kind of talking off air how, we're not even sure if there's a podcast out there or a resource. So hopefully today this might be a little resource for people. But before we get there, can you talk about how, you first got into fly fishing and then how you came to be where you are now?
Sure. Well, I've got a long history. I just turned 65 this week, so we're going to go back many moons.
That's cool.
I started fly fishing probably about 60 years ago now. I was fortunate to have both my paternal and maternal grandfathers were big fly fishermen, and my paternal grandfather had a cabin up on Moosehead Lake in Maine, and although I don't remember it, the family lore is that I spent my first night under canvas at 6.5 weeks old. If you can imagine that.
Yeah.
If you knew my mother, you'd understand.
And under canvas, you mean in a tent?
In a tent,
Yeah.
At Little Duck Cove on Moosehead Lake in Maine, and we never learned how to use spinning rods or bait casters. We were all given fly rods, my sister and I, and so I came by it through my family and sort of stuck with it all through high school and college. And, when I came to a career, fly fishing was not the career I expected to be involved in, but I kept it as an avocation, and ultimately through a number of opportunities, I wound up teaching fly fishing, guiding fly fishing, and getting involved with the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. And now I guide pretty much every weekend, and here in the Shenandoah Valley for Mossy Creek fly fishing.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's a great story, and actually, it's awesome. You hear, 6 weeks old. It kind of sounds similar to my daughter, my first kid when she was born. Same thing, man. We had her camping out on one of the local lakes, in the wind and the cold when she was. Man, I don't know if she was 6 weeks old, but I was pretty young, and I'm hopeful that maybe someday she'll kind of be maybe stick with it and be into fly fishing. I think you're planting the seed. I've heard so many stories on this from people that just got started to people like you, where you've been doing it for 60 years. And so, yeah, I love that. The whole kid thing. Getting kids, I was fortunate, right? And I hope to instill the same thing in my grandkids, is get them out. My granddaughter has a stick, and I was actually practicing in the backyard with my 8-weight, and she said, "Grandpa, this is my fly rod." And she left on Monday, and there's a stick sitting out by our fire pit, and it's like, man, we can't break up that stick. That's Emmy's fly rod. So it's already beginning to take hold, and it's cool. Wonderful. That's cool. Well, a good tip from Cameron Mortenson. You probably know this, but he was on in a past episode just recently. I can't remember the exact number, but he, it was great. He gave an awesome tip on kids getting started. He thinks, a 7-foot 5-weight glass rod from Eagle Claw, which is only about a $25 rod, is one of the best teaching tools you could use to get kids started. So I don't have them. They've got their own normal graphite rods right now, but I'm excited to get these little rods because I think just the smaller rod, the more action will be kind of more enjoyable. And the funny thing is, the thing about it, I got started pretty young too. And I think, my dad gave me a glass rod because I was, what was I in the early 80s, right? I was a young kid. So the glass we still had some glass around. It's so funny to think, right? We had glass around in the early 80s. It goes away for a bit. And now glass is back.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gravitating back to glass rods, and actually I'm one of my 65th birthday presents to myself is having a bamboo rod made by cool. Jerry Kustich from Sweetgrass, and that's going to be a legacy fly rod. But the slower action, and when it comes to kids, and maybe we can get into this later, but I've been a big advocate of the Tenkara style of fly fishing. So, it's simple, and it's a stick and a string, and it's Tenkara rods are super slow action, and you can get shorter ones, so you're not dealing with a 14-foot or 12-foot rod.
All right,
and it's really easy for anyone who's never been fly fishing to pick up the technique of fly casting with a Tenkara rod, and it gets them focused on the fishing as opposed to trying to pat their head and rub their stomach and shoot line and double haul and all that, which is all all good. And it sort of becomes fly fishing 201 as opposed to fly fishing 101.
Yeah. No, that's a good.
But
that's
for
a good
kids,
trip.
it can't be beat.
I hadn't thought about the Tenkara.
Yeah, I mean, Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia pretty much laid it out in their program. This is how we're going to get kids into fly fishing.
No kidding. And what was that program? What do you mean by program?
Well, when they brought Patagonia has Tenkara rods.
They do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they have 3 models of Tenkara rods.
This is cool. Well,
and if you kind of search around the Patagonia Tenkara stuff on the internet, you'll see there's articles that about Yvon with kids. He and Dan O'Brien from Wild Idea Buffalo have taught kids up on, I think it's the Bighorn, some Native American kids how to fly fish with Tenkara rods. There's a couple of great articles, and I think there's a link to one of the articles in my on my website.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I love the Yvon, bringing up his name, and Patagonia obviously comes up a lot. And I've been planting the seed a little bit. Anybody out there that has the Patagonia connection, one of my goals is to get him on the show because, definitely, again, Tenkara. I've never even thought about Patagonia with Tenkara, but they do so much other stuff, so that's really cool. But yeah, well, like most of these shows, we could dig into any of these things and go deep and probably spend an hour talking about Tenkara. In fact, I do have a Tenkara episode in past episode, but I wanted to dig in a little bit to the AFFTA, IFTD, and just before we get there, I wanted to swing back to your parents, your folks there. What can you talk about them a little bit, what they were all about, and what they did and how they influenced your life?
Well, sure. My paternal grandparents were from New Hampshire. They're no longer with us, but and my grandfather started an insurance business, and he was reasonably successful, and their summer vacations were up in Rockwood, Maine on Moosehead Lake, and a place called the Birches, and he ultimately bought a piece of property on Moosehead Lake. And so my father and then my maternal grandfather all went up there, and then as kids we spent half the summer up on Moosehead Lake.
Wow.
And then my maternal grandfather is from Rhode Island, and so I was very, very fortunate to spend half my summer on Moosehead Lake and half my summer in Newport, Rhode Island, and we did saltwater fishing there,
oh, wow.
Fly fishing there. So I had a lot of paternal influence. But what was the most interesting thing, Dave, and the thing that stuck with me and sort of took me down a career path was they were both, my grandparents and my father and stepfather, were very active outdoors people, outdoorsmen, but also very, very steeped in the whole conservation ethic and protect the resource, and the resource will pay you back for it. But that we are stewards of that resource,
right.
Not
where did that come
not
from?
Takers of the.
Where did that come from with your grandfather? Because I think of back in the time, I didn't grow up with, that strong, conservation background. Where did it come from your dad and your grandpa?
Maybe this is cliche, but I think there was a certain amount of noblesse oblige involved there. Is that they were, both of my grandparents came from fairly simple backgrounds, became very successful, and felt that need to pay back, whether it was in conservation and the natural resources, but also, they were on hospital boards and, local charities, and it was a very much of a, again, it's cliche, but noblesse oblige attitude that translated from their time in the field.
And what is the for those that don't know, the oblige? Can you explain that?
Noblesse oblige it means an obligation to give back.
Yeah. So basically, because they were given so much, and then your dad? So what did your dad do and your mom?
He was in the insurance business, and he worked for the family business as I did for about 2 years.
So that's it. You got a family business going there.
Yeah, it was the Sadler Insurance Agency in Nashua, New Hampshire.
There you go, just all life insurance, everything.
No, it was all lines of insurance, and my grandfather started it, and he was a very successful golfer, and made his fortune taking clients golfing.
No kidding.
Yeah, he's not known for his fly fishing prowess, but he was known for his golfing prowess.
That's cool.
In around New England,
cool.
And I didn't get that bug. I got the fly fishing bug, and from that early age, and but again, it was never about taking everything. It was like, hey, we're gonna share, we're gonna do something to take care of this, and we actually lived through the carpet bombing of DDT up in the Maine Northwoods.
Wow.
Saw the impact. I lived through that impact.
Silent Spring and all that stuff. That was you guys.
Absolutely. I mean, they nuked it. And, when I was a kid, they were still running logs down that lake in big booms, and it stopped. But they nuked the lake. It's taken 60 years for it to recover.
Right. Which is in the long term, the big picture, 60 years is pretty fast. I mean, some of these areas are 60 years isn't going to do it. It's going to take longer than that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
but it doesn't recover as fast as something like a wildfire, where you get regeneration fairly quickly. So the unnatural things that we do are not good. Not good.
No, I know that is it's a constant struggle. Well, I think today we might not get into go deep into the conservation piece. I know that the Middle River group is definitely a place. I'm sure you've got a lot of resources there on the conservation end. But yeah, maybe we can just jump into a little bit on AFFTA and IFTD.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know, I think it's something out there that I didn't know much about it. The only thing that came up in my mind, I know when I look back, is AFFTA. It's like, well, the line, standards and things like that. Can you talk about, maybe first, what does AFFTA stand for? And just talk about, we're not going to be able to dig fully into it, but just talk about what AFFTA does best and why they're there.
Okay. Well, so AFFTA is the American Fly Fishing Trade Association, and we represent guides, outfitters, retailers, manufacturers, and manufacturers' reps. We're not a consumer organization. We're a trade association, and that's an important thing to understand when you think about the organization and who our constituents are. And our goal is to improve the fly fishing businesses for our constituents.
What does improve? What does improve mean?
Well, so so improve would be, in making your business more successful. And I want to bookmark the word business, because that's what it's about.
Yeah. And that right there, just let me stop you, because
sure.
It sounds like, for anybody who's just getting started, I've talked to a lot of people on this show. In fact, I have a whole series called Fly Fishing Founders, where I've been digging into these episodes to talk to people who are trying to, some of them have been doing it, but some are just getting into it and they're just getting started. So, for those people, if they're listening to this, I've talked to a lot of them. They said they want to be a guide, they want to get into it, and I always kind of trying to help them. What would you tell them? How can AFFTA help them? And then maybe you can just dig into, the rest of what you do.
So, it's a great question, Dave. It depends on what that person is. Are you going to be a fly rod manufacturer?
Let's just say the person has a new product. It's a simple product, just a basic, thing. And they've got this one product or maybe a couple little products, and they're trying to get that out there.
Then I think AFFTA's, I think so. I think AFFTA's a great place for someone to start, because if you're new to the business, there are things that it takes you a while to learn, and going to joining the trade association and learning about excise taxes, for example, and what are some of the better marketing opportunities, and what are some of the lessons that have been learned from your colleagues, from your peers. If you think about AFFTA as a community of businesses, and I mean to reinforce the word businesses, of businesses who are in the fly fishing business and are there to be successful, then AFFTA can help you navigate some of the opportunities and some of the challenges. I've had people who've called me over the years and said, "Oh, so I'm making a fly rod," and I'm saying, "Well, are you aware that if you sell that fly rod in the United States, you need to pay an excise tax on it?" And then they go, "Well, we don't understand that," and that's a tricky thing. For people to navigate, and they're not sure what that's all about, and AFFTA can help them with that. And the good news about that excise tax is it goes to conservation of natural resources. It doesn't wind up just in the treasury, which is from a fly fishing world and from the fishing world, and it applies in the hunting world. Those excise taxes are part of the North American model of wildlife conservation.
That's awesome. What do you think is the biggest challenge for a new company, new fly fishing business trying to get into, and maybe they want to make it a full-time thing? It's kind of on the side. What is the biggest challenge to doing that? Or is it just like any business?
It's like any business. So, when I considered opening a fly shop, a good friend of mine, Casey Walsh, said to me, "Well, you can make a small fortune, but you better start with a large one." Everybody's different. I look at what Brian and Colby Trout have done, the brothers that own Mossy Creek Fly Fishing. They have taken their passion and made it into their business. And that's a distinction that's important. And if you're not
passionate,
doing what you like, then it's a job. But if you're doing what you like, then it's your life, right?
Right.
And so I would tell anyone who is thinking about this, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you just trying to make money? There's ways to do that. And frankly, AFFTA can probably help you with that. But if you really want to get into the small business lifestyle around the fly fishing genre, then that's another consideration. And again, I think AFFTA can help you, because most of all of the members I've ever met from AFFTA are dedicated to the sport, and the sport has a long storied history that is interesting, remarkable, and laudatory. I mean, you think about what fly fishing represents. There's a lot to commend it, right?
And And it is a
Go ahead.
the AFFTA, and I'm just thinking worldwide. So are there other groups serving, kind of those folks that are out? I mean, definitely, in the Europe or anywhere else around the world?
I should know the answer to that, and I don't know definitively, Dave, but I believe there are European trade associations.
Yeah, similar deal.
I know there's an European trade show, AFFTA.
Oh, okay.
And I believe that's I believe that's just that it's both fly and conventional.
Yeah.
I don't think there's just a fly like IFTD is just fly. So I don't think there's a similar thing in Europe. And after we get outside of Europe, I'm going to really back off and say my understanding.
That's fine. We can. I'll put some links in the show notes to anything I find that can connect people. But
Sure.
so that makes sense. Basically, so if somebody was new to it, probably the best thing to do would be to sign up. And I think I just saw that you guys just went over 1,000 members, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so that's
milestone.
That's a big milestone. I mean, 1,000 people. So what would you recommend? Somebody's kind of new to it. They have this product, they're out there. So you would recommend first thing, maybe just talk about the first few steps of how, is it just sign up and then just you guys will send out info and take it from there? Or what are the steps?
Yeah, well, it's like anything, Dave. It's what you get out of it, what you put into it. So if you're looking for help, then I would be contacting Ben Bulis, who's the president of AFFTA, and we're a small trade association. I mean, the staff there's 3 or 4 staff people.
Yeah.
But Ben has been a successful businessman in his own right and has led the organization to the growth that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so he can, if you say, gee, I'm trying to figure out this, Ben's Rolodex is at the nuclear level. I mean, he can say, "Oh, then you should be talking to so and so." So there's the resource that someone gets is you're tapping into the network that AFFTA represents, and Ben's the great place to start. And then he can say, "Oh, well, if you want to talk about this, then you should talk to these guys, or if you want to talk about this, you can talk to these guys." And that's the networking aspect of AFFTA is really the
big thing.
The big thing, right?
And that's where I'm excited because I'm going to be heading to Denver to talk to you and hopefully as many people as possible. That probably will be the challenge, is that there's no way I'm going to get to talk to everybody that I want to. And this podcast has been a resource for me, and it has connected me to a bunch of people that I wouldn't otherwise. I think some people, obviously, they're probably on the board of AFFTA and things like that. But, so I guess looking at my situation, I'm going to be heading to Denver, to IFTD. Can you talk a little bit about, IFTD, how that is connected to, AFFTA, and maybe how I might, or somebody that's going there, take advantage and do the best at networking, or, say they have this product and they want to get the word out, or what would you recommend for somebody in that place?
Sure. Well, that's, you're asking the best question is, how do you get the most out of AFFTA? I mean, out of IFTD. And it's going to depend on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. But let me speak to you.
And let's just take my example, because I do have a new upcoming, I'm not even calling it a product because it's more of a, I'm trying to, it's more of a resource, but I'm kind of looking at maybe getting into some of these, and I'm totally new to it, so I don't even know, but some of these things where I could, it's essentially kind of like a hosted trip, but where, I'm kind of connecting, the people that listen to the show with some of the experts, and just this cool to these destinations. So it's kind of this new idea, but I'm kind of working on it, and I'm hoping to have something together. So if that's something I'm working on, maybe think of that as you think of, the show.
Well, sure. And let's talk about you've got a product, right? So first you have to decide whether you want to have a booth at the show. And you would talk to Ben about that. I think we're getting close to sold out.
Sure.
And we did, and I'm sorry, I don't know the answers for sure on this, but we did have what we called the new business area. And so they were smaller booths. Now, because the excitement of IFTD for 2019 is that we've left Orlando, Florida, and returned to Colorado, Denver, Colorado, in October. That's made a lot of people happy, especially people in the Front Range, and so it's that excitement has really pushed the engagement, the number of people that signed up to exhibit.
Oh, okay.
But it's an opportunity to showcase your product by demonstrating it by having a booth there.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's one option. So whether it's a fly box or hosted trips or a magazine. I've seen all of those. My good friend Jim Klug from Yellow Dog Fly Fishing and the magazines. The fly fishing magazines. Tom By from the Drake and the guys from everybody. All the magazines. Everybody's there
exactly.
And so you fit into it, and then from a media point of view, and this would be the same thing if you were, for example, a retailer, right? You want to sit down well in advance, like now, and start plotting out, okay, I need to talk to the folks at Sims. I need to talk to the folks at Patagonia. I need to talk to the folks at Farbank. Yep. In 3 days, it's amazing how fast the time goes. I have walked the floor with Colby and Brian, and we've had to divide and conquer with three of us.
That's right. How many people? Because realistically, how many people can you talk to in 3 days? That's the thing. It's a challenge, right?
Well, and it is, and then it's you need to do triage. You need to do
you need to have a plan.
You have to have a plan, and you need to set those appointments in advance because the plan is going to all have to fit together into a 12-hour a day. And then there's all the networking opportunities, and that's with, both in the show and outside of the show. Just the stuff in the hallways, the information transfer that goes on outside of the show floor, the seminars that AFFTA puts on. All of that,
right? There's a lot.
It's useful, but you have to think, okay, what's my mission here, right? You set your mission, and then you set your goal for that mission, and then you break it down into a plan.
There you go.
And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are, unless I would say if you're a manufacturer, then you've got your booth, and then there are certain dealers that you're going to want to be talking to, and then you're going to be looking to see, well, who's the up and coming retail shop here?
Yeah, do a little bit of background. No, that makes sense, and I think for the this concept I have, obviously the talking to some of the lodges, and like you said, Jim Klug, who I've had on the show already, and people that are in the know on the all the destination would be a great start. But I'm hoping to get up there and not only dig into a little bit of that, but also, I've interviewed your number. Gosh, what am I up to now? I can't remember exactly, but I'm getting close to 100 episodes now, which is
fantastic.
Yeah. So it's been an episode a week. And so I got a lot of people, that I want to connect with. So there's no way I'm going to get around to everybody. And I don't know if all of those will be there, but I think long term, like Cameron Mortenson said, he gave out a few hundred cards the first time he went to IFTD, and then he gave away 70 the next time. And then it was down to 30, and then by the third or fourth show, he's not even giving out cards. He's pretty much, is networked and knows people. So I'm hoping to get to that point.
Well, that's the synergy between AFFTA and IFTD, Dave, is that networking opportunity, that face-to-face gathering of the clan at IFTD is one of the huge benefits of joining AFFTA.
Yep.
But also it's the entree point into all the benefits that belonging to AFFTA provide. And it's knowing who, having stood and talked to Ben Bulis or Matt Smythe or Colby Troe or whoever the incoming president of AFFTA is, and getting to know them and having their cards and maybe sharing a beer with them or more. It can't be beat. It really can't be beat. And then the other plug I would make for folks who want to be successful in the industry is being engaged in your trade association, and however that manifests itself. But there are a number of committees. I chair the Government Affairs and Alliances committees, but there's marketing committee, communications. Mm-hmm. So there's a committee for everyone. And if you involve yourself in those committees, and you don't have to be on the board to be on the committee, then you're going to get a chance to look under the hood of the industry, not just the trade association, but the whole industry, whatever area that you're interested in, and be engaged. And then, to the degree that you're committed to the industry, you can then become a board member and really get inside the under the hood, and then become an officer and really drive the car. So there's a lot of opportunity to be involved.
Gotcha. Well, and I wanted to get into a little bit more on your role there and all that, but maybe we can jump into a little bit on the and it is the fly, the weight, the rod standards. Is that something that AFFTA? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's a legacy. It's a legacy issue or part of AFFTA is when AFFTA was born.
Which was when? What year was it born?
Oh, I'm gonna say probably in 1996.
Oh, wow. So fairly recently. I mean, there's there was back in the pre-AFFTA days was the American Fishing Tackle Manufacturers Association, and they actually had a science wing, the something Fishing Institute, SFI. All right.
But those ultimately combined into the American Sport Fishing Association back in early 90s. And then the fly fishing world, the folks involved in fly fishing there felt it was important to have their own trade association, so they created AFFTA. And guys like Casey Walsh and Paul Schluter and Bill Klein and Jim Barchi, and I'm missing a few back in those days, started up started up their own trade association because they felt AFFTA needed its own representation. But back in the day, there was, my words, not anybody else's, it was a bit of a Wild West with real seats and foot and all that, and line weights. And so those standards came over from AFTMA. If you go back and look, maybe I'm really dating myself, but the old fly rod line weight designations were letters, were alphabetical, not numerical. HCF, and Tom Rosenbauer can tell you what it means. I can't remember it. I'd have to go find my charts. But and line weights are still measured in grains, but it's a range, and it's an interesting area as lines have evolved, as there's been more innovation in line standards.
Yeah, and more innovation and confusion for some, right? Because there's so much going on.
Well, yeah, and I think it's I love it. It's like new technology to me. I love the fact that there's always innovation going on, that things cool. Like fly lines have different coatings, have different textures, and have different tapers.
Let's take a quick break from a word from our sponsors. The Gray Drake. Since 2014, the Gray Drake's mission has been to provide high-quality heritage fly fishing tackle while being good stewards of our sport. They use sustainable cork instead of silicone or foam inserts in their fly boxes. These cork inserts are naturally self-healing and hydrophobic and will hold flies from the smallest midge to the largest stoneflies and hoppers. Be on the lookout for the new Fall Run fly box available in 2019. This aluminum fly box features small and medium-sized clips on one side, and on the other, slotted cork, which is perfect for bombers and skaters. Conservation is the key with the Gray Drake, and they support great organizations including Utah Stream Access Coalition and Trout Unlimited's Wild Steelheaders United. Head over to thegraydrake.com to check out their classic selection of fly boxes and wallets today. We are also sponsored by Deli Fresh Design, a company that makes sustainable fly fishing gear in the heart of Denver, Colorado. Deli Fresh blends old waders and Cordura canvas to make rugged, river-tested gear, such as fly wallets, koozies, and their classic sling packs. You can listen to the full podcast interview with Ross, the founder of DLD, at episode 79 of this podcast. But take a quick listen to a short clip from that interview that gives an example of how Ross reduces his waste with his personal actions as a business and highlights his dedication to conservation.
But as a company, I'm trying to reduce my impact by riding a bike or taking the bus or shared cars, stuff like that on for commuting. And then, when I go fishing, I'll get in a car, but I try to go with other people. And so I think there's things that as consumers that we can do on a daily basis, not just to throw money at a problem. I think that's the last thing we should be doing, is sort of deciding where we can make an impact on a personal level. And I think my own mentality of doing those things on a daily basis, like driving or riding a bike, and then trying to see what materials I can use that reduce waste, or what I'm trying to do as a person and as a company.
Let's help Ross and DLD do great things today and this year for fly fishing and conservation. All of DFD's gear will help you spend more time casting and less time juggling your stuff. To see these great products, go to Instagram and follow them, where you can see their latest designs, or you can head over to delifreshdesign.com and use the coupon code WFS20 to get 20% off your next order. Okay, back to the show. Well, Marty Shepard, he broke down, we were talking about spay lines, because that's a real confusing thing, but on the episode I had him on, I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me here, but he was basically saying, actually I do have it as C. Marty Shepard, episode 76. He was just saying it's pretty straightforward. You go out there for winter steelhead, you grab a Skagit line, and it's not that, it doesn't have to be that difficult, right?
Right.
You can make it difficult, but it's really simple. You can just go get a line and just go get started. So I think for some people that want to nerd out and go into it, they can, but yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. But basically you have this line standard, the AFFTA, which basically tries to put a standard for weights of rods and how that relates to lines.
That's right. I mean, it's again, you don't want complete Wild West out there where, a person buys a reel that doesn't fit on the rod, and, the line that they think is a 3-weight turns out to be a, something completely different, or all that. And, I'm going to sort of loop back to the Tenkara thing again, is that, that creates a whole different conversation about line weights. And, but it's the simplicity. And so, as a guide, as an instructor, and someone who works for a retail store, that, being able to simplify it, but also being able to provide the customer the full range of tools is important. And, but making sure that when we say, well, this SA 5 weight and this Rio 5 weight line and this whatever 5 weight Orvis 5 weight line are all going to work on your Scott, Sage, Winston, Orvis rod, whatever. That's important. You don't want the tools to be mismatched, right? You don't want to put the wrong chain on the chainsaw.
No. That makes sense. So yeah, and there's a little bit of variation there. Obviously you can, have a little heavier line or lighter line depending on the rod. So, but yeah,
sure.
That totally makes sense. The Tenkara thing. And I think that's another thing today. I think we're not going to have a ton of time to dig into it, but we have talked about that. And, it's been interesting because, you got the people in both schools of people out there that are like, Tenkara, what is that? It's not even fly fishing. It's, this, and then you got the people like in your side. And I've talked to a number of people that are pretty, powerful, kind of heavy hitters in fly fishing, and they talk about the benefits to Tenkara. So what would you say to somebody who basically is out there saying, Tenkara, there's no reel, that's not even fly fishing? What would you tell that person?
Well, I think it depends on how you want to define fly fishing, but a fly, a line, and a rod are fly fishing. The reel doesn't make fly fishing.
Yeah. Now, are you in the industry? Are you kind of pissing off the new reel manufacturers out there?
Oh well, no. When I was on the board of AFFTA for 11 years. 10 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah. Before Tenkara, when did Tenkara? Has it been out there forever?
Daniel Galhardo from Tenkara USA. They celebrated their 10th year this year.
There you go.
Those were the first rods I used, and that was through reading an article in Fly Rod and Reel that Yvon Chouinard wrote, and I called his good friend Craig Matthews and said, "So tell me about Tenkara." And he said, "Sadler, for your brook trout fishing, it would be the jam." Huh. And he was right. And but here I am on the board talking about a tool that is, nothing like a conventional fly rod, nothing like it does not use a reel, does not use lines that have standards, white line weights. Mm-hmm. We started fooling around with diameters to try to distinguish them, but it's really more material. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I caught a lot of grief.
You did. People
sure.
were calling you out, and
all in good fun.
Yeah.
All in good fun. But, I got a number of lefty no Tenkara stickers, and what's the worst thing about Tenkara is telling your father you're gay.
All that stuff. Well, and I had John, Gearrock. We were talking about it, and he had an article. Well, he took a whole year to do Tenkara. And when we were chatting about it, he basically, I thought he was kind of into Tenkara a little bit. And then as we started talking, he's like, well, let me set the record straight. I tried it out because I wanted to write about it for a year, but then that was the only time he ever went Tenkara fishing. So it catches on to some people and some people he doesn't. Do you think it's just a small, or why does it catch on to some people and some people it doesn't?
It's a tool in the toolbox, right? Why you don't brook trout fish with a spey rod. You don't steelhead with a 3-weight, a 6.5 foot 3-weight, right? It's a tool in the toolbox. And if you're open-minded and say, gee, I'm willing to try something better or something easier or something more effective, I have been doing demonstrations for almost 10 years now. And, it's you're high sticking a dry fly. And if you visualize that as a fly angler, you try to do it a lot anyway, but if you have a tool that's designed to high stick a dry fly, you can think really quickly about the applications where it will come in really, really handy and really, really effectively. Then the big thing, and this is the thing that has kept me engaged in it, is it's simple. It simplifies fly fishing to its really basic core: rod, line, fly, fool on the other end. And and that's the thing that, again, going back to Chouinard, that's where Patagonia, put their energies behind that whole simple fly fishing concept, and that's, to me, has what sells it. So it's getting people who don't fly fish, who want to learn how to fly fish. But really, what do you want to teach them? You want to teach them to fly fish, or do you want to teach them to cast? If you want to teach them to fly fishing, then eliminate the hurdles that make fly fishing challenging.
Yeah.
The way you cast, all the complications of line weights and rods and at lengths and stiffnesses. It's simple. It's stick in a string, put the fly in the water, keep the line off the water. Then they're focusing on fishing. Then you're talking about, well, okay, you want to fish in this seam. You want to hit this pocket. You want to make sure you're getting the fly in this area. That's fly fishing to me.
Yep.
It's not about, and not to take away anything from the people who are casting, but it is, if you're starting people out, make it simple, get them into the sport, and then take them on the journey through, whether it's, largemouth fishing where you're making, longer casts, or saltwater or spay, get them in. But boy, if we make it difficult for people to get into the sport, we're hurting ourselves. And that's, I really I've never had anyone seriously say, you should be, hung in the town square for fishing with a Tenkara rod.
No, it's not that crazy, but
no.
Yeah, no, I think it is a good, definitely. And Tenkara too. I had Tenkara Tanuki on a past episode, and that's what he said. I mean, he compared it to, you just catch more fish. If you're in the right situation, that it's just easier because, again, you take out all those things of casting and the big struggles for people. So yeah, no, I think it is a good resource. I think Tenkara, for anybody that wants to get into it. I did want to touch on a little bit on we talked a little bit about it, but the local fly shop, that you guide through. And can you talk just briefly about, what your local water is there and how you catch, and which species and how you catch, fish there?
Sure. We are extremely fortunate here in Virginia, and especially in the Shenandoah Valley. We have brook trout streams on either side of us. Virginia is second only to Maine in the number of brook trout fishing opportunities that you have. Although New Hampshire's probably looking side-eye at me and saying, well, we're pretty close.
Are these big brookies, average brookies?
Well, so, define big. No, they're not. They're not Labrador brookies.
Yeah, exactly.
They're, a good fish around here is going to be 9 to 11 inches.
Yeah.
Bigger, big fish, 12 to 14. 14, you're pushing the envelope on native brook trout. But that's the thing. They're the native fish here. Locals call them specks. So we're bookend with that. And Mossy Creek fly fishing is in Harrisonburg, right in the center of the Shenandoah Valley. So we access both sides of the mountains, the George Washington National Forest to our west and the Shenandoah National Park to our east. So public land. We're very fortunate to be able to provide, the Commonwealth can provide fishing in a lot of public land.
What is the biggest named river there?
So in the mountain streams, it would be the Rapidan is probably the most storied brook trout water. Down on the valley floor where our spring creeks are, which are browns and rainbows and brook trout, Mossy Creek would be the more storied spring creek here in the Shenandoah Valley, and probably in Virginia. Everybody, and there's a love-hate relationship with Mossy Creek because it's challenging, and it is.
What makes it challenging? Is it just the fact that there's a lot of people fishing and?
No, actually, that's the last challenge. Is that
really?
that it's not pressured horribly. it's a true spring creek, right? It comes out of a spring head, and flows, and then is supplemented by other small springs, and it's got weeds, it's got
gotcha,
moss,
Mossy,
it's got mud banks, and so finding the place to put a fly, and this is where Tenkara became, a light bulb going off, is if you think about trying to cast across a mud flat into a channel of water,
right, that's not good.
It's really hard because you drop the line onto that mud, and it's hard to make mends, and so you're doing all sorts of 301 type stack mends and air mends, whereas the Tenkara rod, you keep the line off of all of that stuff, so you get these incredible drifts, and then you're dealing with browns and rainbows. I mean, who couldn't be happier?
Yeah.
And then we get into the summer when it's I'm guiding this weekend, it's going to be in the 90s. We'll be finished, we'll be off the water by 11 o'clock. We get to fish on our warm water stream rivers, the Shenandoah and the James. So we have the South Fork of the Shenandoah, where we run smallmouth bass trips out of rubber rafts, and you're going to have phenomenal fishing. And if you get hot, you just go over the side and cool off and jump in, and then jump back and up and keep fishing. And you've got it's not uncommon to have 50, 60 fish days, and if you start targeting the big fish up on the banks, the bug eaters right on the banks, you're going to find some pretty good size 20 plus inch smallies. And then we have not during the summer, but they're still around, but we target our muskie fishing in the fall. 50-inch muskie.
Right.
It's the cast of the fish of 1,000 cast others, and it's a workout, but it's worth it when you hook one.
What's your, if you had to pick one species to fish for and only one, what do you go for?
Brook trout.
Really?
I've been involved with brook trout conservation for almost 20 years. They are the most spectacular fish on the planet, as far as I'm concerned.
Just because of their coloration and beauty.
Their coloration. Just you can't imagine. A good friend of mine from Florida came up and said, "I've never seen a fish with colors that I like this."
And there's some amazing, when you think about, grayling, for example, the colorations on some of those, photos and fish you see. I mean, there's obviously some beautiful fish, but that's cool to hear that brook trout, is kind of the one species. If you had, I usually ask the question kind of and this is perfect since you're a guide, but the 222, which is the top two flies, tips, and resources for brook trout. What would you say? What are two, if somebody was going to go for brookies up in that area, what would be the top two flies you had picked?
Parachute Adams and pheasant tail nymph.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you can fish anywhere with those two, and you can fish them wet, you can fish them dry.
Yeah.
The parachute, because it's an emerger style, just works really well. And the great thing about brook trout is they eat stuff, right? Yeah. They like to eat stuff. So you throw them out there. I mean, I remember back as a kid, my father and grandfather's talking about you could throw cigarette butts out there, and a brook trout would take a swipe at it.
No kidding.
And you see folks using strike indicators, right? And the brook trout come up and whack a strike indicator. It drives you crazy. That's why I won't use the silly things when I'm brook trout fishing, is because you miss an opportunity to hook up a fish, because a brook trout will eat pretty much anything.
No kidding.
Or take a whack at it, right?
Yeah. What's your, for brook trout, do you have a couple of tips maybe that just fly fishing tips that might help somebody?
Well, at least around here in the Shenandoah Valley, if you're fishing our mountain streams, my tip is to put a fly in any water where you can put 1 foot in front of the other, and the water is going over the tops of your boots.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
So there's especially as we get into the late spring, early summer, those fish have spread out. They will be, one or two fish will be holding in every little pocket. And I constantly dumbfound my clients by telling them, make a cast. We'll be walking up an area and I'll say, just make a cast over there. And they'll drop a fly in there and a fish will hit it. And they'll just look at me gobsmacked and say, there's no way I would have thought a fish is there. And I said, that's the thing. People walk by miles of fish because they're looking to fish in a big open pool and they're missing these little places. And it's if you get into it, it's way cool because you're just walking along and just dinking flies in and picking off fish. And of course, you know, they're gonna be bigger fish in some of the bigger holes, but in a place this half the size of a bathtub, one of my clients this spring picked off a 11-inch brook trout at the head of this little, and Dave, it was not even 6 feet of water at length, and he picked this nice fish off right at the beginning, and just again he was gobsmacked. Couldn't believe there was a fish there.
That's so cool.
Especially a big fish. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I would say always, if you can, fish 2 flies until you're catching 80% of your fish on your dry fly.
Okay.
You know, it's not hard to take 9 inches of 5X and put it behind a parachute Adams and tie a pheasant tail on it and go one size smaller, in tippet and in fly size. And, is that your
typical, so the dry dropper setup, is that pretty much what it is right there for you? Is there any, just tie on the dry and then tie off a dropper on the tail from the hook shank?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's perfect.
That's 90% of the time when I step into Dry River or the Rapid Inn, that's the setup I'm going to put my clients on.
Gotcha. That's cool. And what about, so I am, Mossy Creek probably has some resources, but do you have a couple of good resources? Anything comes to mind for somebody that's heading out to that area for brookies? And it could be a book, magazine, video, shot, anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have information on the Mossy Creek website. The state has the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries has information about where you can fish, where their stocked water is, and where they have a very aggressive trout management program. They're just revising it. Brian and Colby and I have all been involved in reviewing their trout management. The state really cares about its trout management program. The regional office is 5 minutes from my house, and Paul Bugus and Steve Reeser and Jason Halitcher are all good friends, and they really are committed to it. And then our Secretary of Natural Resources in the Commonwealth is a fish head and really cares about, and he's super about it. So that's a great resource, and it is. I have a series of articles about Tenkara fishing for brook trout on my website. But we encourage people to get out and take advantage of the public lands. That's, you've got the George Washington National Forest, the Shenandoah National Park. Mm-hmm. If you go to the Forest Service, if you go to the Park Service websites, you can get information. But want one-stop shopping, and I'm not trying to make this into an ad, but we've been doing this for a long time. Mossy Creek Fly Fishing's website will get you dialed in really quickly, really quick.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes it easy. What We mentioned this a couple times, but the Middle River Group, your website. Can you talk a little bit about maybe somebody that hasn't been to the site, what you cover there, and what the focus is, and and I know there's a lot.
Well, websites are, they're just they're online brochures. The Middle River Group is just the holding company for my consulting business. I currently am the deputy director of the Marine Fish Conservation Network, so I'm not doing any consulting. So the website really is where I house my blog, dispatches from the Middle River, and I focus on conservation, fishing, politics, and there's some antics on there periodically, mm-hmm. But it is I don't want to say moribund, but it's a bit dated at this point. Mm-hmm. Most of my focus these days is dealing with marine resource issues, public policy at the federal level on our oceans, and so that's taking a lot of my time, and when I do get a chance to write, I try to focus mostly on the fly fishing stuff and some of the conservation stuff.
Gotcha. What's the on the oceans? It seems like obviously it's such a big, there's lots of problems, lots of issues. For somebody that doesn't know anything about it, what would you recommend how they might be able to, maybe connect with some of the issues, or just learn more about what's going on, what they can do to help? I don't even know what the issues are out in your neck of the woods, but anything.
Well, so it's. I mean, I'll put a plug in for the network. It's the Marine Fish Conservation Network. We're a coalition of if you think about everybody who's on the waterfront, right? Whether it's seafood processors, small boat commercial fishermen, tackle shops, recreational anglers, scientists, environmental organizations. We brought those groups together to talk about federal marine resource policy. And so if you want to sort of keep up to date on marine issues at the federal level, that's a great resource. I'll put a plug in for the American Saltwater Guides Association. It's my friend John McMurray started it recently to focus on issues in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with menhaden and stripers right now.
All right.
And for you guys on the West Coast, stripers have become our steelhead problem.
Yeah.
And for those folks who are listening who are down in the Gulf of Mexico, when we say stripers, you guys think red snapper. Mm. So mm-hmm. That's a challenging thing. And then the thing that probably got me mostly involved in all of the marine resource issues was the plastics issues. The amount of plastic waste in our oceans is abominable. And trying to solve it is going to be a worldwide problem and a worldwide challenge. And that's a personal thing. And it's, this is going to be really sappy, but seeing whales caught in nets and straws in sea turtles.
Right. Straws are a big thing, right? Just plastic straws.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, I get laughed at because, I'm death on plastic straws. I have a metal straw in my backpack and I get sort of like my new Tenkara grief, right?
Well, there's a big movement, I think. I mean, definitely you're seeing it out here too. There's a big movement for banning straws and all that as well.
Sure. It's an icon.
Iconic, right?
Yeah. Make it, it's plastic bottles. I mean, you look at what Costa and AFFTA has been involved in reducing plastic waste. Colby Trout, who's the current president and one of the co-owners of Mossy Creek Fly Fishing, pushed the industry towards using recycled cardboard fly boxes. So if you think about going into a fly shop and all those old plastic fly boxes, the little tiny ones where you picked up a dozen flies and threw them in a plastic thing, tried to move them out. And AFFTA was the leader through Colby's good works get that changed.
That's
and every little thing makes a difference, right? If you say, well, one vote isn't going to make a difference, that's nonsense. If you stop using plastic water bottles, stop using plastic straws, stop using plastic bags, make a little bit more effort and give a damn about what the future looks like.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's I'm not sure, the like we said at the start, the Rachel Carson Silent Spring. I'm not, obviously that's a good book, and I can't remember how the whole thing started with her, but I mean, I'm sure it probably started on a small grassroots, a few people, and built into this thing that eventually, now we have the EPA and water quality standards, right? I mean, that started with a small group, similar to probably any of these
Yeah,
issues.
I mean, it's people caring, and it's people, think about, 60 years ago, the littering problem, the amount of litter on our roads. And it was really, people finally said, no, I'm not going to throw stuff out of my car. And you can see, the YouTube videos now of people throwing stuff out of their car and people throwing it back in there and saying, come on, we can do better than this. And simple things, again, getting back to where AFFTA was and leading the industry, and it's, you can buy 3 different sizes of recycled plastic cardboard fly boxes through AFFTA, and it's a very inexpensive way for a fly shop. It's actually cheaper than the plastic to give the consumer a box, and you can recycle it. You can bring it back to the shops, and they'll recycle it for it.
That's cool. Well, we're Tom. We're getting about there as far as wrapping this thing up.
Okay.
But I just had a couple more I wanted to run by you here, and
sure.
One of them is, maybe you can just again finish up with IFTA. Can you take me to the floor for somebody who hasn't been there? What when they walk in the door, what do they see, and what's this thing going to look like?
Okay, visualize this. You're a 7-year-old child. You're finally aware of what Christmas is like, and you come down the stairs, or you walk through the door into the living room where the Christmas tree is and all the presents are. That's what you look like the first time you walk onto the floor at IFTD. It's magic. It's magic. If you're in the fly fishing world, even if you're a jaded industry veteran, you look at that aisles of booths of the things that make fly fishing enjoyable. And I use that word specifically, enjoyable. They are laid out in front of you in rows. And it takes, I think, seasoned veterans of going to shows to not be overwhelmed by that first view. And, it's mind-boggling, and it's exciting, and
it's new, right? New products, and
there's new product, and there's old friends, and there's activity and excitement. And I can't think of the time when I have seen a sad face on the show floor.
That's cool.
I've seen tired faces. I've seen people who have just been beat up, but it's exciting. And it's just, you think of aisles of new product and old friends and new friends, and, the show floor transforms at the end of the day into sort of a roving cocktail party. AFFTA has events where, and then, each vendor has outside events, but it's a pretty darn exciting 10 hours a day.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, this is cool. You said the Christmas. I love how you started painting that picture, because that's kind of, I think of obviously for kids, and we're all kind of kids, right? That's that we shouldn't lose that piece. I'm as excited about going to Denver this year as I was the first time I went, and as excited as I was last year down in Orlando. It is, Christmas doesn't get old, right? No.
I don't care how jaded you are, right? So this doesn't get old. It's that much fun. it's that much fun.
That's cool. So, okay, well, and just, we haven't touched, mentors, obviously your family, you had your grandfather and stuff like that, but any other mentors, that you would kind of point out that have helped you in your fly fishing, just the whole thing from where you are?
There's probably, when it comes to casting, the mentor that helped me the most was the late Mel Krieger.
Okay.
He made sense to me. If you've never seen his Joe Schmuckapop videos, I commend them to you.
What are they again?
Joe Schmuckapop.
Okay.
is a character in Mel Krieger's fly fishing videos.
Nice.
Obviously,
are those out there? Are those on YouTube?
I don't know if they are, but I wouldn't be surprised. He had a whole series of videos. So if they're not out there for free, I suspect they're you could probably find them for sale, and they would be worth it. I will promise you, they would be worth it.
Cool.
Mel was terrific. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lefty Cray and Joan Wolfe.
Uh-huh.
I actually sat and interviewed Lefty for a Tenkara, about Tenkara. It's on my website. Craig Matthews and Yvon Chouinard have been very influential. Craig actually performed the marriage ceremony when I got married.
Oh, wow.
13 years ago this month on $3 Bridge and on the Madison River. And it was Craig, and Craig has always been a great resource, both from the fly fishing world and the conservation world. The late Jim Range was best man in my wedding, and probably one of the greatest unsung heroes in the conservation of in this country. There's a tribute to him again on my website if folks don't know who he is.
Oh, cool. I'll put a link to that.
And then honestly, the Trout brothers, Brian and Colby, have mentored me in the business world as much as I've probably mentored them. And I speak to one or the other pretty much every day. And it's their enthusiasm, their involvement in the industry that have made my life richer. And my commitment to fly fishing that much stronger.
That's you just mentioned.
And I'm missing a bunch of people, but those are the ones that me right there.
That's probably the greatest line of mentor. I've asked that question a number of times, and yeah, that's pretty powerful, the people you talked about there. So, and what about, you again, what would you say, this is kind of getting back to this thing has come up, and maybe this will be the last time I'll say it on this show, but, as we've talked about some of the business thing, there's no money to be made in fly fishing. It comes up occasionally by people talking about how difficult it is because I guess it's a small niche. What would you say to somebody, that says that?
Well, I was flippant when I was quoting Casey, but it is, this isn't, becoming a venture capitalist. I mean, there are better ways to make a lot of money, but if you want to measure it in monetary terms, I think it's, as I say, there's probably better things to do to make a lot of money. But if you like fly fishing and have an interest in the business, an interest in the industry, there's a lot of people that can support you, and they are all, there's 1,000 of them that belong to the American Fly Fishing Trade Association.
This is a question that, I've been asking. I've been having a lot of fun on music. Do you have a, like a favorite band or type of music, you listen to?
Sure. So it runs from Lyle Lovett and Robert Earl Keen to Jimmy Buffett to the Rolling Stones to the Grateful Dead. Perfect. So those are the things that will usually come up on my playlist, although, and not just because we're talking today, but I have become very enamored with a long variety of podcasts. So when I'm commuting up to Washington or running between gigs on guiding, the podcasts are coming up. Your podcast, we were talking earlier, with Rachel Finn was one of the more entertaining things. And so it's, especially now I'm listening to a lot of political podcasts.
Oh yeah. Well, what would be one political podcast, are you talking about politics and related to the outdoor industry or just in general?
No, politics writ large, mostly electoral politics. The one I listen to quite a bit is Hacks.
Oh yeah.
HACKS, Hacks on Tap.
Hacks on Tap. Yeah, that's Axelrod and Mike Murphy.
And Murphy. Yep, Murphy and Axe.
I love those guys. Yeah, which is cool about that. In Axe, I've been listening to the Axe Files for a while. Mm-hmm. I think that went to a paid thing now, which I haven't been listening lately. But yeah, I love Axe. Axe, and then Murphy's kind of the same thing, right? They're one is kind of Republican, one's kind of Democrat. Mm-hmm. They kind of cover both ends. Yep.
No, they're. I have spent almost 40 years advising political campaigns, and those two guys, when they're talking politics, resonate really, really closely with. I love the balance that they bring. I love the observation, and they do a tremendous job of analysis. That's not sort of, opinion as much as it's experiential. If I were running a campaign or if I were running for an office, I'd be listening to those guys and going to school on those guys.
So what do you think with those guys? Because we're in this crazy world, right? It seems like with how divisive politics are, and you look at those two guys, and you actually don't see that. You see these two guys that are kind of like, why don't we have more of those guys?
That's a $1 million question, Dave. Why is our politics devolved into this? And that's a whole nother podcast.
You're right.
I've watched it. I started working in Washington in 1980. So,
oh, wow.
I've seen a lot of change. I have my theories, but, I think we're going into, the precursor to the Phoenix, where it's going to burn down and something will rise from the ashes. Right. I'm heartbroken to see what's happening. I've been a Republican since I first started in politics in 1964, going door to door for Barry Goldwater. I've worked for a Republican senator. My father and grandfather were involved in the Republican Party, but this is not my Republican Party.
Right.
I'm a Theodore Roosevelt Republican. So if somebody asks me what party, I identify as Bull Moose. And, so I don't know where we're going to win.
And I'm on the outside of it, in fact, I've, since I had my first kid, 7 years ago, I just haven't had time to get into the politics. So I've kind of stayed out of it. But, I think the biggest thing is that, it seems to me the big change between now and where politics, the great thing about politics is being able to sit there and have a conversation, and it's crazy to think that we've lost that. Even if you're totally, your ideas are different. It seems like now we can't even sit down and have a conversation, right? So I think that's where we got to get back to, that thing where you could, whether you're Republican or Democrat or whatever, that you could at least talk. So yeah, we'll leave that for the next episode.
But you hit the nail on the head, and there was a movement, and there's an article on my website about this in the politics tab, about sitting down and have a beer with me.
Yeah.
Have a cup of coffee. Let's talk. We're not doing that. We're yelling. We're screaming. We're sharing
social media.
Mean, ugly memes, and I'm guilty of it on occasion. I try to keep to the ones that I find amusing, but we're not sitting down and having conversations. And I think one of the great things with guys like you, Dave, who are reaching out to people, you're having conversations. And I hope we use the new town square.
Yep.
To have those conversations, and that we use things like podcasts and whatever evolves in the future to be those coffee shop conversations. You know it. You remember. I remember sitting around a coffee shop with the graybeards and listening to them talk about the good old days. But you know what? We were doing it as a community, and
yeah,
you know, it is. I hope we can get back to that, and that we recognize that there's so much more that we have in common than we have in difference, that we rise from the ashes of this horribly destructive period that we're in, and become a better people, not only in this country, but around the world.
Yeah, no, it's well put. So yeah, I'll put a link to the show notes to the old or the Hacks on Tap podcast and some of the other stuff. So, well, I'm gonna let you get out of here. In the next 6 to 12 months, anything new that we can expect from you or the Fly Shop or AFFTA, or anything you want to note here?
No, I mean, I think AFFTA has made its big change in moving the show from Orlando and being co-located with ICAST to a standalone show in Denver. I see that happening for a number of years. I won't say it's going to be the permanent location, but I would say it's going to be there for the next few years.
Cool.
And you know, the industry's healthy, outdoor recreation's healthy, and the people, the American people, recognize the value of our public lands. And we have good organizations like Trout Unlimited and the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers who are pushing to protect those public lands. And for us at AFFTA, you know, access to healthy habitat creates recreational opportunity that drives economic activity, and that's how I think the industry is going to continue to be successful.
Yeah, no, I love it. And that's a great way to put it. So I'll leave it at that. If people want to find you, they can go to, let's see, the middlerivergroup.com is probably the best place if they have questions or want to see what you have going on.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, Tom. Well, that's all I have for you. This has been a lot of fun. I think we've definitely dove around and finished up with a little politics, which is always fun. So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing, shedding some light on everything we talked about today, and I hope it gives folks out there a start in digging in a little deeper. So, yeah, we'll hope to see you in Denver.
Great. Look forward to it, Dave, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, we'll see you then.
You bet. Bye-bye.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes to all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/Sadler. Interested in heading out on a fishing trip with me and a few of the great guests from the podcast? We'll be heading out to a trip this next summer, and would love to connect you with myself and some of the great guests we've had on the show. Go to wetflyswing.com/hosted. Again, that's HOSTED to find out more and to get your name on the list for this big trip. Thanks again for stopping by and check out the show today. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon and hope to maybe see you online or on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.